Back in 1997, when in the UK, New Labour came to power under the leadership of gurning guitar-playing future war criminal Tony Blair, one of their slogans was "tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime." And the previous government, led by John Major, now Sir John Major, they had an even shorter slogan, which I think the Home Secretary Michael Howard came up with. And that was 2 words: prison works. Because back then, it did. During the 1990s, some violent crimes in the UK dropped by 45%, because back then prison was a deterrent. Prison worked. Now scroll forward to 2023 and the Ministry of Justice, and a member of the MOJ is former Prime Minister Sir John Major. They want to change the language used so that people who are incarcerated for committing serious crimes don't have their feelings hurt. Under new proposals, someone sent to prison for committing a crime will no longer be referred to as a convict, prisoner or inmate. Because even though those terms have been fine for centuries, now suddenly they're hurtful, derogatory and problematic. So the idea is, if someone is found guilty by a court and sent down, that person will now be referred to as a person of lived experience. What the fuck does that mean? Everyone is a person of lived experience. It's just that those who are currently banged up, their experience usually involves very poor decision making. And of course, the prisons are full of people with mental health problems and traumatic childhoods. But I'm sorry, there are loads of people living their lives with mental health problems who aren't criminals. Sorry, people of lived experiences. And as for childhood trauma, we've all got something. For everyone, something went wrong when we were growing up, and that could be very minor or very huge. But either way, if your way of dealing with your own personal trauma is to pass that pain on to someone else, then you should be fucking locked up. But it doesn't end there. The Ministry of Justice have turned the wokeometer up to 11, and they are suggesting that anyone convicted of committing a non-violent crime should not receive a custodial sentence. But crucially, they haven't defined what a non-violent crime is. Now, fraud, that isn't a violent crime, but currently it's costing the British economy in excess of £2,000 a minute. Burglary isn't a violent crime, but it's traumatic for the people who return home and find their possessions have been stolen and the house has been ransacked. They are victims, and of course burglars and thieves and their ilk all share the same personality trait. They're fucking lazy. They want something, but they can't be bothered to get a job and earn the money for it, so they just take it from someone else. Lock the fuckers up! Technically, drug dealing is a non-violent crime for the most part, but I would argue any bastard who spends his afternoons standing outside a high school selling heroin to the schoolgirls deserves to spend a long time with his freedoms removed whilst he reevaluates his life choices. And horrible as it is, possession of indecent images of children, that's a non-violent crime. But I would also say anyone who's caught with that shit on their hard drive should spend a long time at His Majesty's pleasure being very nervous of using the showers. Of course, there are some crimes where people shouldn't be sent to prison. For example, if you have an old dear who's got the first signs of dementia, if she walks out of a shop without paying for something, yes, that's shoplifting. But if the reason she's done it is because she's a bit puddled, then let her off. Also, increasingly we're seeing at events like Let Women Speak, or anything about women's rights, those events tend to get protested by trans protesters. And I think any woman should be well within her rights if she's trying to air her opinion and she's getting screamed at by a confused man in a dress, then that woman should be able to kick the trans woman in her bollocks. And if a parent, say a father, discovers that some sick weirdo has been interfering with his 8-year-old daughter, then said parent should be able to go round to the nonce's house and hit 10 bells of crap out of the guy. And when the police arrive and become aware of the situation, their response should be, "Excuse me, sir, I understand you kicked the shit out of a kiddie fiddler. Is he still breathing?" "He is." "Oh, on your way, you grand. We're going to arrest the sick fuck and make sure he falls down the stairs at the station." I'm aware it sounds like I'm calling for vigilante justice, but given that the powers that be, the Ministry of Justice, seem more concerned about the emotional well-being of the worst scum we've got locked up in the UK prison system than that of the victims. Is it any wonder? Because how long will it be until prison warders are on disciplinaries for accidentally calling a prisoner rather than a person of lived experience? Yes, sir. Come in, officer. We're putting you on a disciplinary because Mad Johnny Psycho said you referred to him as an inmate rather than a person of lived experience, and that's hurt his feelings. He's got quite emotional. And we don't like it when Mad Johnny Psycho gets emotional, because last time he got really worked up, he killed his entire family. Now, if I ran the prison system, things would be very different. The prison population would be much smaller, because people would be fucking terrified of it. There'd be no flat screen TVs, PS5s or pool tables. No, it would be education, because we do need to reform people in prison. Education and then back-breaking manual labour. And this wouldn't be like a Victorian prison, it'd be much worse. It'd be like a medieval dungeon. If you don't want to work, then you don't eat, mate. And not only that, the prisoners would have to grow their own food. Why should the taxpayer have to keep forking out for the fuckers? And it's a sad state of affairs when people of lived experience, criminals who've been convicted, well, they've got secure accommodation. It has to be secure, it's a prison, that's the whole point. But they've got a roof over their heads, they've got 3 meals a day and hours of leisure time. So being a criminal gives you a better standard of living than many people struggling in the cost of living crisis. They say that crime doesn't pay. In this country it bloody does. As ever, thanks for watching.